Welcome to the Dave Palma Show, the podcast that revives, restores, and awakens your innermost capabilities.
You have the training and the talent to succeed, but do you have the guts to fail?
I love what I do. When you love what you do, you want to be the best at it.
Today is about the power of you. You will change the world.
Find your path to success through the journey of those who have succeeded. And now, your host, Dave Palma.
Hi, welcome back to the Dave Palma Show. And with me in this episode, I have a former educational tutor, small business owner, and part-time freelance news and feature article writer, Merrie H. Reagan. Welcome to the Dave Palma Show.
Good morning, Dave. Good to be with you.
Good afternoon over here in the UK, but good to be with you as well. So you've had a quite a mostly around education and writing. That's your background, it looks like. But obviously, with this book, looking at this book, Life Flashes, which we're going to go on to now, you've obviously chronicled some events around your own life and what you picked up, some global events as well, which is called Life Flashes, a memoir, a chronicle of personal and global events. Just want to start off with kick off with a question. So you talk about a lot about world-changing events in your book. Can you discuss some of them and what you see as their effect, both personally and cosmically?
Well, I think that, first of all, when you talk about life-changing, you can't talk about life-changing events without talking about life-changing people. And what I've realized is that we're all life-changing people. Things we do and say every day touch people around the world. And I think that realizing that has been very empowering. There were many people in the book that, I mean, there are so many. I wonder if you could, well, for example, like when I was growing up in the 1960s, I remember I was brought up Catholic, and I remember meeting a cardinal in 1961 at an Easter Sunday Mass. And then a year later, the Supreme Court of the United States banned prayer in schools. And later on, in many years, and of course there was in the Catholic Church, there was a crisis that happened in 2000, a clerical crisis that happened, and then in 2008, 3 women were unofficially ordained priests in the Catholic Church. I don't know what happened with that. I sense that they may have been excommunicated. And then in 2016, the Pope decided to create a commission to consider women becoming priests. So there were no women priests. The idea of women being priests then would have been, people would have said, "What are you talking about?" No, women aren't intended to be priests. So you see people evolve over time and societal and personal circumstances. And then when I was growing up, when I was probably 8 years old, TV was only 10 years old. Black and white TV came out in 1955. Color TV was in 1954. So when President Kennedy was assassinated in I hope I get the right date, 63, November 22nd, the advent of television gave the United States a chance to grieve, and the world to grieve as a nation, and also to see the justice system at work, because the person who killed him was captured, and unfortunately he was assassinated too. In the 60s, when I was growing up, was the first time the United States was involved in a space race with Russia. So astronaut John Glenn in 1961, he circled the world, the Earth 3 times. And I watched him on TV, as a space rocket that he was in splashed down into ocean waters outside Cape Canaveral Space Station in Florida.
Yeah.
And then in 1969, it was the the Apollo landing on the moon, the Apollo spaceship landing on the moon. And then in 2003, I'm sorry, 1989 was the Challenger disaster, where all the astronauts, just after taking off, including a teacher who was chosen to go on the mission too, she was killed too. And
It caught fire, didn't it, in the air?
pardon
Is it
me.
is it the one that caught fire in the air?
Yeah,
Space
yeah, and
shuttle,
then
yeah.
yeah, and then in 2003 there was one, the Columbia. Curiously, shuttle. There were the same number of people, 7 astronauts, and it exploded just before it was coming back at the end of the
Mm.
mission. And then in 2011, I went to a Memorial Day celebration, and the guest speaker was a retired admiral in the Navy. His name is Stephen Bowen. He grew up in Cohasset, in the same town that I grew up in.
Yeah.
And he went on 3, he was selected to become an astronaut and go on 3 missions to the International Space Station, bringing cargo and supplies. You know about the International Space Station, right?
Yes, yeah. In Houston?
Yeah. And he was a Navy submarine specialist, and he was chosen to be an astronaut by NASA to go on missions to the International Space Station, which is I think it's about 250 miles up above the Earth, and it's about the size of a football field, and they do all kinds of research and experiments there, scientific experiments there, and there are astronauts from around the world there. So you can see things. When I was growing up in the 60s, that was just the beginning of women going to work, and my mother was no exception. She went by, after 15 years of being at home with children, she was feeling increasingly confined. She wanted to use her administrative skills, and she wanted to be with adults. So she went to work. There was mixed reaction among family members. Dad wasn't happy about it. I wasn't either. Selfishly, I wanted her to be home when I came home from school, even if I was going out.
Yeah, no, yeah.
But my brother and 2 sisters who were, I didn't really have solid career ambitions then.
Yeah.
So, but my other brothers and sisters did. And so they were like, you go for it, Mom, go to work. And then 40 years later, I met a man who had decided to become a stay-at-home. Well, he and the wife. He was in the military. He was he was served in the Desert Storm. He was a Marine, and what happened was he was a sales manager at a uniform company, a very well-regarded uniform company, and there was a daycare center there. So they said when the wife became pregnant, they would send all the kids to the daycare center. But then what happened was she initially was in the finance world, and then she decided to go to the corporate world, become a corporate attorney. So when she did, her income, and then in the meantime, at some point she became pregnant, and her income potential was now like probably 2 or 3 times the potential of her husband, income potential. So they decided that he would be the stay-at-home dad, and he has been from that day on. And he said at first it was very difficult for him. I mean, he used to jump out of planes. He was in Desert Storm, and all of a sudden he's at home,
I know what
making
it's like.
baby formula and doing diapers. He's like,
Yeah, I know.
what's this about, right? but he
Yeah.
loves his children. And
Mm.
I saw him like a few years ago, and he loves it. He's got
Yeah.
his kids. He's been a stay-at-home dad now for 17 years.
Oh well. Well,
Where
I'm
did all
sure
that time go?
he's
Yeah,
not
it
changing
seems like
diapers for a 70-year-old, so that's a relief, isn't it?
sorry,
He won't be changing
sorry.
diapers for a 17-year-old, though, will he?
Yeah, no, no, no,
Oh,
no,
unless
no,
he's
no.
got a
But he said in the
newborn.
beginning it was tough,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah. I
But
can imagine. Yeah,
he really it was just it was mind blowing for me to see that, you know.
yeah, yeah.
It's just still like mind blowing for me to see a girl who's playing hockey, you know. There's just a
Yeah.
part of me. It
Oh,
doesn't
right.
mean
Which which hockey? Ice hockey or
I think she's playing ice hockey.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So there's a part of me, there's all in all of us, you know, that we're not I'm not I don't like the idea of girls playing hockey. Is there does that mean I'm prejudiced? No, it just means I I know that there's just something that I haven't accepted about it. There isn't anything wrong with it.
Mm.
But for people, just because they aren't ready for a change, it doesn't mean they're prejudiced. It just means that they're struggling with it. I know that
Yeah,
it's, um, I accept it in my head, but for some reason, it's hard for me to, um, it's something that I'm going through. You know what I mean?
yeah.
You know
I
what I mean?
think
Everybody has these things that they
yeah,
don't,
yeah.
for reasons they don't understand, they find it difficult to accept. There isn't a thing wrong with it. I'm thinking good for you.
It can be
It just
very physical and can be dangerous, I suppose. Really, not too dangerous, not like boxing, but women box.
it
The
can be,
women
yeah,
boxers know,
it can be life threatening. I
Yeah,
mean, and
yeah.
the other, I mean, just a little like there are people came over to do some work on the trees, an arborist company, and the head arborist was a man, was a woman, a
Mm,
woman and a man. I was
yeah.
like, oh, you do that? You do tree surgery? I'm like, women do all kinds of stuff now.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
And
Well,
it's
I
just
worked as a
men are
firefighter.
doing, men are doing things that women did. When men are
That's
becoming
that's
for
right.
years,
Yeah.
they're becoming
Well,
nurses and
that's right. Exactly. Yeah.
you know,
I worked as a firefighter, and I've always worked. There was always been a female firefighter that I've worked with, but the first one I worked with when I joined in 1990, there was only 49 in London, female firefighters amongst I don't know how many 6,000 firefighters. So that's not a great deal, is it? I mean, there's probably a lot more, but still a very small amount. But yeah,
yeah,
it's a kind of thing now where I think you probably might, in your early days, you described the 1960s and 70s when I was growing up as a kid in the 70s. I was born in 64, so I remember black and white TVs and color TVs just coming in because, you
yeah.
just
So
about,
we're about on the same plan.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
older than you.
Yeah, I remember all the Apollo ones and twos, three, well, not ones,
Yeah,
but I remember all the
yeah,
Apollo missions and, JF Kennedy, they kept showing it over and over again. Martin Luther King
yeah,
was also assassinated, and
yeah.
things like that. But the,
Well, and the other thing, civil rights. I remember Condoleezza, former
that's
U.S.
right.
Secretary of
Yeah,
State.
yeah,
She came to the JFK Library to speak about a book that she wrote, a
yeah.
memoir,
Oh, right.
Extraordinary Ordinary People.
Yeah,
This was in 2010.
right.
But she talked about growing up in Birmingham, Alabama. She
Mm.
wasn't allowed to swim in city pools.
I think I remember that
She,
book. Yeah,
yeah,
she's, yeah.
they weren't allowed to sit at a UOS counter. And at some point, and you know, um, she was about the same age as the three girls who were killed inside a Baptist church. They were young girls.
That's
They were
right. I
shot.
think I remember hearing about
Yeah,
that one there, that
yeah.
book launch. Yeah.
And I grew up in Cohasset, which is a suburban town, on seaside suburban town about 30 miles south of Boston. And so it was at the time, it was very homogenous. And yet I wasn't, um, I wasn't unaware of the issue of civil rights because I knew, for example, I knew a girl in elementary school, that she said that there was another girl in school that she wanted to be friends with these girls. she wanted, and I guess she just wanted to be accepted by them or something. And she's in the fourth grade, and this one of the girls used to come up to her and just kick her in the stomach until she couldn't breathe.
Mm.
And then a year or so later, I remember it, and the girl went home and she didn't want to tell her mother because she was like, why does this girl kick me? What's wrong with me? And and then about, I don't know, a year or so later, um, the girls were, one of the girls in the group asked, you want to play hide and seek with us? This is like in between, I don't know, in the quarter. I don't know whether it was just before we go on a recess or before we go on lunch or something. So anyway, the girl says, oh yeah. She said, I think these girls like me now. They want to play with me.
Mm.
So they say, okay, well, you come over here. And they say to the girl, you come over here and we want you to hide in here in the locker. So the girl goes in the locker and they lock her inside there. And she's in the locker, like, like this, in a contorted position for 20 minutes.
Mm.
Until the class teacher finds out, and she comes out and does that. So I wasn't, there was bullying going on. I understood the purpose of civil rights, and really, what it is about goodwill toward each other, being kind and respectful and cooperative with people, no matter who they are, where they're from. But so she came, so I wasn't unaware of that. Also, I wasn't, so, things have come quite a way since then. So now we've had, with, Barack Obama having become president of the United States he was president of the United States for 8 years, and he was loved by many. And also another thing is that when I was growing up, I became increasingly aware of the issue of mental illness, which in the 60s you didn't talk about.
Stigma. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Yeah, you just didn't do it.
Still is around now, but of course it's. I mean,
It's
even in the institutions, it was very bad for people with mental illness. It made them worse, if anything, didn't it? Because
Yeah, well, that's it.
yeah,
Because
so this is a
you
problem.
brought up a good point. Because
Yeah.
Rosalind Carter, former Secretary, the late First Lady Rosalind Carter, she when Jimmy Carter, former President Jimmy Carter, was the governor of Georgia, she said she visited these state hospitals, and there would be 12,000 patients crowded into a hospital that was meant for 3,000 people. There would be people that would be, they were over medicated, they were rocking back and forth in
Mm,
chairs, some were
mm,
wearing visible diapers. And she said, oh, she was over an advocate for mental health for over 40 years. And in 1979, she was very much involved in the passage of a Mental Health Systems Act, which publicly disavowed overcrowded hospitals, medicating patients, and um, advocated for including patients in plans, wellness plans, and giving them choices. And that was really what began, this deinstitutionalization. There was a lot of course, with the change a little. It wasn't all smooth, but that was when they began building, out of outpatient clinics for people who could go, could handle being out of the hospital and could go to a day clinic, and also
mm,
residential homes for people, so that they would have a more welcoming or healing environment for recovery. So, and
mm,
she was very much involved in that.
mm,
And it also too, you think mental she also said one of the things that she found out when she was writing the book, it was that she came to promote, which was within our reach, ending the mental health crisis. She said that today, so that was back in 2010, so I'm sure it's at that level today. There's 25% of workplace productivity losses are caused by mental illness in the workplace. And I was in the audience of 600 people. Everybody gasped when she said that. We were stunned to hear that.
Yeah,
That's a good deal, and it could be a little bit beyond that. I'm not wanting it to be now, but and so it gives what it enabled me to see. It enables people to see that mental illness is not something that just happens to those people. It's not a mental ill. Every human being experience some level of mental illness during a lifetime. It may be very mild. It may be moderate. It may be severe. The difference between people who are ill and people who, to an extent, the people that are ill and the people that are in recovery is people that are in recovery are learning to identify the triggers of what causes them to be ill and then to address them. That's the only difference.
yeah. Well,
Make sense?
yeah. I mean, to a point. I don't know too much about it. I'd have to
Yeah.
obviously look at her work. So, in talking about, because obviously it's a very positive book that you've written there. What tips can you offer to help people think positively and overcome self-defeating thoughts on that subject?
Well, I think first of all, what it enabled me to the book starts out with a profound spiritual experience, and what I learned to do in that experience again was to reconnect with God, and I was at a point where I didn't think I could go on any much longer. I just couldn't do it mentally or emotionally. And I was, and I walked outside where I was living at the time. It was 5 a.m. It was in the middle of winter. I was dressed very lightly, and I'm thinking, I don't think I can go on much longer. I'd been ill for a number of years, and I all of a sudden I was just facing mortality, and I knew God was there without any question, ever. I've known from that moment. Even when I doubt it, I know God's there. And so and basically I remember, continuing to walk and talking with God, just simple prayer, simple, honest conversation. And I remember all of a sudden this spiritual hand reaching down to me and a voice saying to me, "Come with me, I'll show you how to live again." And from that day forward, on that day, I stopped ingesting prescription medication for depression that I had been prescribed for 2 years. That was it. I didn't ever go on it again. I had no interest in it. So that was a powerful healing, which has continued since then. So what I'm 100% sure of, and there are many things I'm not sure of in life, is that for a person to experience true success, true peace in life, it cannot be done without dependence on God, a transcendent being, however defined, a being far beyond self, and that it's miraculously depending on God, a transcendent being enables you, really fully depending on it, helps you to be independent, not dependent. The world may say to you, "Oh, that's a bunch of, it's a crutch." And it's not, I mean, it's not a crutch. When you fully, or I suppose in a sense you could say, yes, it is a crutch. It helps you, a crutch that helps you to become independent.
Yeah.
Does So I'd say put when I, and the reason, and I realized that the reason that had been ill is because I was putting everything else on the front burner. Whether I was in a relationship, house size, I didn't own a house. I didn't, I um, drove an old car. I had difficulties with work. I had difficulties with relationships. And so I felt God saying to me, and everybody does. Everybody does has, financial issues, and so the difference is, when you put those things on the front burner, that's what made me ill.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to trust you first, and everybody, I'm not going to trust any being the way I do you. Everything started to turn around. And I still continue learning that, when I'm disappointed in relationships or, work matters, it just reminds me, don't make this person, don't make this job, don't make anything the be all end all. Then you go down the slippery slope. To say, and I don't have to, when conflict comes, I don't have to like it or understand it. We're not asked to do that. All we're asked to trust that we can move through it. So, but okay, tips for continuing: put God on the front burner, do what you love, not what you think you're supposed to do. That was another big issue for me. I had been doing what I felt people wanted me to do instead of even thinking about what I wanted to do. I found that everything that I'm really enjoying late in life, all the things. I'm a ballroom dance student. I used to make fun of people who were ballroom dancers. And yeah, I said, I see them dancing at a pavilion, at Seaside Pavilion. I'd be like, that is so corny. I would never do that. So now I've been a serious
all right,
student.
okay.
Yeah, for 7 years.
It's amazing how that all changes, isn't it? Really, I suppose it's a bit like salsa. It's very similar kind of thing, really, isn't it? It's
What's that?
It's a bit like salsa. It's a very similar thing, really. I never really saw myself taking up salsa, but I did it in one stage.
Oh, salsa,
of
my life. Yeah, salsa.
Salsa, yeah.
Yeah.
And I did at one stage of my life. I did, so.
Oh, you did? Did you like it?
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, as a kid, I was more into, the nightclubs and the kind of things that teenagers do, but then it just got like that. It just got like that in my late 20s, 30s, that kind of thing, and then. But it's a kind of like what you're talking about, ballroom. It's a similar kind of thing, isn't it? Really, It's
well, that is
you grow
ballroom.
up a bit in your mind,
ballroom.
and you open your mind a bit to what's other things.
That's it. You open
available.
your mind into you go outside the box. I didn't ever think I would be writing a book. I had no intention of writing a book. I just started writing a diary, and then 3 years later, I said, "Oh, I think it's a book. I'll keep going." Had I known it was going to be another 11 years before I finished it, I probably wouldn't have done it.
No.
That's why we're not always advised as to, how things are going to unfold.
Yeah. Well, we're running out of time now, but I'm sure I'll have you back on the show again. I'm gonna do this thing where I'll keep in touch with all my guests, either through there's a few ways to keep in touch, but obviously I've got all their emails, so I'll find a way to do that, and then individually I'll get back to them, so it's not a problem. But before we send them to your book,
this is a half-hour interview.
It is at the moment, yeah. I'm going to try and change my platform to try and get it longer. But we're just looking into it. But that will be later on this year. That will be doing that.
Okay.
The first half this year. Okay. Be like this. But before I send my guest to your book to find out where your book is and your website or whatever.
Well, could I also give you the my website for the book is Merrie MERRIEH Reagan REAGAN.com. I think that's helpful because there are I presented 2 excerpts from the book in a video presentation on the website. Yeah. So, which gives you a full flavoring of the style of the book. So if you watch those, you'll know right away whether you want to read it or not.
Right, excellent. Well, that's where they'll find the book anyway, so that's great. Well, before we go, we had a little chat about because when we talk about things like mental health and staying positive and things like that, even having animals and things like that. Now, I know we spoke about your dog. What's his name?
Yeah,
Your dog's name?
Jura,
Yeah.
Jura.
So
Yeah.
how that's important in your life. I'm not going to talk about. I'm not going to talk about what conversation we had, but I know you're very serious about your dog. So can you tell us what it means to have a true canine companion? Because for mental health, it's very good anyway. For positive, for stress release and things like that. They always say having an animal and pets, it's a really good thing. You know, with an eye to emotional well-being and happiness. How important has that? True canine
Well, let me
companion be?
just quickly finish because I really didn't fully. I will,
Okay.
and I'll go right
We've got
into
two
that.
minutes though, so
The
we'll try.
tips. Okay, tips for positivity: put God on the front burner. Do what you love, not what you think you're supposed to do. Accept conflict, loss, and waiting is a natural part of the growth process, and realize that God doesn't give us what we can't handle, and if you think He does give us what we can't handle, look at people around you who are going through things that you couldn't handle for 5 minutes.
Mm.
As far as Jura goes, Jura, he taught me about, I won't ever know love like that again. I won't.
Mm.
He taught me about accepting uncertainty, quiet confidence, and humility.
Mm.
I didn't plan on adopting him.
Oh, you adopted him. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I adopted him.
Yeah.
He was actually belonged with another family member, and then I ended up adopting him due to circumstances. And he just taught me that life is not about planning; it's about passion.
That's great.
And yeah, he taught me about relationships. He taught me about holy possession, if you will, holy possession. I remember him one time. He was sitting on the living room floor, and I had a friend over. We were talking, and I could tell he was jealous. He wanted to come up on the couch with us because he was feeling that he wasn't being given proper time.
Yeah.
And he loved it. But then, a few weeks later, I went to a laundromat with him, and there was this young girl there, and within 5 minutes, he was in her lap.
Yeah, it can be like that, can't it?
He was really, I didn't ever, he lived to be almost 17. We were together for 10 years, and not at any time did I ever see him be mean, nasty, greedy. Not ever.
That's great.
Not ever.
Yeah. Well, on that note, we're going to have to round it up here. But I mean, no wonder they're called man and woman's best friend, not just a human's best friend. So we'll leave it at that. But animals, whether it's a dog or a cat or whatever you like, it's good for stress and for companionship.
Do you have
like
any
you
animals?
Not at the moment, but we did have some cats actually. So, and I think I'm more into dogs really, to be honest myself. So, there you go. Well, we have to round it up there, but it really sounds like a fascinating book, and I will try and get my head around it, Merrie. But in the meantime, thanks a lot once again for sharing your book and your story with my audience today.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me on the show.
That's all for this episode. Thanks for listening, and remember, if you want to support what we do, then share, subscribe, and leave a review over on Apple Podcasts, or head over to my website, davepalmer.com, and click on Rate Show. Well, that's all for now, but I'll see you in the next episode of The Dave Palmer Show.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.